right, so our recording has started. So, welcome everyone to tonight's live discussion on our second quarter book, which was The Highly Sensitive Person's Guide to Dealing with Toxic People. And today, I have the privilege of introducing our moderator, and then our moderator will introduce our guest speaker. So, our moderator, Miss Latanya Floyd, joined the network in 2018. She immediately got to work chairing the committee for the inaugural Esteem Fair, which was a huge success. She then signed up for the National Talent Development Officer for the term of 2020 and 2021, bringing to the membership the Real Career Talk podcast. And if you have not listened to it, I urge you now to download those episodes and go back to 2020 and come on up to date. She also started the mentoring program. Again, those normally come out around October, November to sign up. Sign up if you haven't signed up. It is powerful and impactful for your career. The skills development program, and that is out there on PLE. So go out there and sign up for those. Start developing your skills and move to the job, your dream job. And last but certainly not least, she created our leadership book club, and here we are today. She has been with AT&T for 10 years and has held many roles, primarily focused on data and reporting in construction and engineering, finance, business, and is currently part of the technology organization. Latanya enjoys spending time with family, volunteering, and being on beautiful beaches. So, welcome, Latanya, and I hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dee, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much, Chloe, for being here with us today. So, Miss Chloe Lemelle is AVP Human Resources, but Dr. Chloe Lemelle is again AVP of Workforce Diversity at AT&T. In this role, Chloe and her team are responsible for strengthening AT&T's culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Prior to rejoining AT&T's Human Resources Department in 2022, Dr. Lamel served as the Director of Cultural Transformation within AT&T Consumer and the Director of Ethical Culture in the Chief Compliance Office. In these roles, her team's primary focus was on cultural evolution and enhancement. Chloe joined AT&T in 2013, working on the organizational performance team in human resources. Before AT&T, Chloe served as an executive consultant at a consulting firm now owned by IBM and was responsible for executive level assessment, selection, and coaching. Chloe's areas of focus and expertise include diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, organizational culture, mental health and wellness, employee engagement and ethics, organizational surveys and focus groups, leadership assessment and selection, individual development and coaching. Chloe earned both a PhD and MS in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of Texas at Arlington and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Louisiana State University. Chloe is a licensed psychologist in the state of Texas and an active member of the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychologists. Dr. Lamel also serves as UTA's College of Science Advisory Council and on the board of directors for Dallas Dinner Table. Chloe's most rewarding role by far is that of a mother to her two children, Bronx 6 and Boston 4. Again, welcome, Chloe.
Thank you so much, Latanya. Thank you. And I love that I kind of saved the best for last. People who've heard me introduce myself, I always say that I'm a mother who works because that showcases the order of priority for me. And that's the biggest blessing, the toughest job, but the most rewarding job that I've had to date is being a mother first in 2015 and then promoted in 2018 with the birth of my daughter. So delighted.
That's the best promotion I've heard.
Best promotion of all time for
That's
sure.
awesome. That's
So
awesome.
delighted to be here to spend this evening with you all to talk about topics near and dear to my heart that are very, difficult topics. Talking about narcissistic people, talking about highly sensitive personalities. So I'm super pumped about this discussion. If we could, Latanya, before we jump into the discussion, I always love to know who's in the audience. I know we'll spend the whole time introducing people, but if you can just really quickly just go down and tell me where in the world you're located, would love to know where you're sitting, and then just in what business unit you work, just so I can get a sense for who's joining us this evening
Okay.
for the discussion.
So I'm going to look at the participants list here. Sandra Carter, would you share where you're calling in from? She might be on
No.
mute.
Yeah, she was traveling, but Sandra is in Atlanta.
All
Okay.
right. Latoya
Very nice.
Emmanuel, where are you calling in from? Yes, Latoya is on mute as well. Diane Ferris.
That third time would be the charm.
Yeah, I saw her come off of mute. Where are you calling in from, Diane?
I'm calling in from Douglasville, Georgia, which is west of it, West Metro Atlanta.
All right. Thank you, Diane. Carol Griffin, where are you calling in from?
Dallas, Texas.
Right. Thank you, Carol. Manahar Katakam, where are you calling in from? Manahar, are you there? Right. Michelle Martins, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from New Jersey, Middletown, New Jersey.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle.
East Coast.
Miss Minerva.
I am calling from the heart outside of Charlotte. I'm going to name it, say Charlotte, but I'm in Matthews, North Carolina. So glad to be here. There's a couple of folks that are responding in chat as well.
Oh, okay. Awesome. All right. Shanna Nichols.
I'm outside of Central Texas. I'm outside of the Austin area, so in the hill country of Texas.
Great. Thank you, Shauna. Renee Nicholson.
Renee's in chat. She's from Atlanta, Georgia, at the AT&T Capital Services. That's Renee. She's using the voice of Minerva Mitchell.
All right. And thank you for that, Miss Minerva. If you could read out anybody else, that would be great. All right. Tamiko Pete.
Hi,
Where are you
I'm
from?
Manohar. I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Manohar. Where are you
Because
from?
I'm using a desktop. You don't have a microphone. Okay. No,
Okay.
I'm here. No, I was mute. Okay.
Oh, okay. Where are you calling in from, Manohar?
Chicago. Oh, half minutes. Yes. Chicago.
Chicago.
Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Manohar.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Tamiko Pete.
Hi, Latanya. My name is Tamiko Pete. I'm in the FirstNet product marketing operations, and I'm also too calling in from Chicago.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Tamiko. All right, Jen C. Pullum.
Hi there. I'm part of the talent acquisition team and I sit in Dallas, Texas.
Thank you so much, Nancy. All right, Sharon Scott, where are you calling in from?
Hi, I'll be the voice of Sharon Scott. She's calling in from Bedminster, New Jersey, from Billing and Settlements.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. All right, Mary Smith. Where are you calling from?
Yes, I'm calling in from Swanee, Georgia, which is a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm in the controllers team.
All right, thank you, Mary. Kendron Stewart, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Los Angeles, California.
Great. Thank you, Kedron. All right, Isaac Terry, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Tracy, California, which is outside the San Francisco Bay Area.
Great. Thank you, Isaac. Michelle Thomas, where are you calling from?
Michelle. Woohoo! Hi, it's Michelle Thomas. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas. And I have to say, 3 of my favorite people are on the screen. So Chloe, Tonya, and DeWanda. So I'm so happy to be here to support you all and to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Much love,
All
Michelle.
right. Deandra Young, where are you calling from?
Hey guys, my name's Deandra. I'm from the DFW area here in Texas, and I'm on the Raise Your Hand team with the Mass Markets group.
All right. Thank you, Deandra. And were there any others in chat, Miss Minerva?
Let's see. We said Renee. We have Latoya Emanuel from San Antonio, Texas, and Sandra Carter from Atlanta, Georgia.
Great. Thank you, Latoya and Sandra. All right, Miss Chloe. And I want to say a special thank you. Dee mentioned the Real Career Talk podcast. We have had both Chloe Lemelle and we have also had Michelle Thomas. And their topics for both of them, they came separately, but it was on emotional intelligence, which is definitely related to our topic today. So again, if you haven't heard those, please go back and listen to those. All right. So Miss Chloe, are you ready for us to jump into these questions we have for you?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad, Latonya, that you indulged me in walking through where everyone is located. That was also some practice of getting off of mute so people can talk, because I want this to be a highly interactive discussion and definitely want to hear your perspectives as much as I'll share mine. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so again, the book title, Highly Sensitive Person's Guide to Dealing with Toxic People by Shahida Arabi. And when I read this book, I didn't know that I was a highly sensitive person until I read it. And I know she uses a lot of we and us, right? But it wasn't just that. It was definitely all of the points she was making about how a highly sensitive person behaves, how they, go about dealing with certain situations. So our first question for you, Chloe, is would you please define what being highly sensitive means?
Yeah, and I had a similar reaction to you, Latonya, where I didn't realize going into the book that I would be classified as a highly sensitive person. And the more I read, the more I was like, check, check, check. Yes, yes, yes. And I'll go to what she says to quote it right. So a highly sensitive person is more emotionally and physically responsive to the self, to their environment, and to their relationships with others. You have a highly tuned radar for everything happening around you, makes you more prone to overstimulation, but it can also be a benefit because you're extremely discerning in your interactions with others. So that is to me how she defines it. And then as I took it, it's just someone who is highly aware, highly attuned to what's going on around them, to other people's needs, concerns, and desires. But I'd be curious to hear from others how they define being highly sensitive. I'll also share while people are thinking. I mentioned my son, and Latonya did as well, who's 6, who I think after reading this book is also highly sensitive. He is the most focused child that I've come across for sure. And he feels all the feels and he's attuned to what's going on. And he's been this way for a while, ever since he started expressing his thoughts, emotions, and words. And I am glad that we had this opportunity. And again, I'm so thankful to have been invited for this because it was enriching to me, not only as an individual, but also as a parent.
Was there anyone who wanted to share? Because I do have a follow-on question for Ms. Chloe on
Latonya,
this
I
one.
have a point that I'd like to share. I think I
Sure.
resonated with this is Tamiko, by the way. I think I resonated with exactly what Chloe shared in yourself as well. As I was listening, I did the audiobook. I was listening to it. I was kind of like side-eyeing my tablet, and I was like, oh my God, that's me. Check, 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 that's me. And initially, when I was reading it, I was like, should I feel ashamed that that is me? But by the time I got to the end of the first chapter, I knew it was a gift. I was like, okay, there's something to this, and there's value behind this, and I have to learn how to use this or translate this into a superpower for myself. And that was really awakening. So I just want to share that.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
right there with
Tamiko.
you, Tamiko, because I looked at the way I didn't know there was a name for it. First of all, this book was like, oh wow, okay, Revelation. but I always looked at it as a weakness and something that I constantly work to overcome. Like, how can I be stronger? How can I feel less? And, things of that nature. So now I am of the mindset too, okay, it's not a curse, it's a blessing. I just need to know how to use it and how to set the boundaries and how to make it work for me. But there's not a problem with me.
Exactly. Exactly. And so the follow-on question I have for you, Chloe, around that is definitely related to emotional intelligence, right? So let's say you do have that highly sensitive person, but at the same time, they lack emotional intelligence. What does that kind of look like? And, we'll get into some of how to, how to deal, but what would that actually look like if you have this highly sensitive person, but at the same time, they could use a little bit more emotional intelligence?
Yeah, and I would see that as more of a diamond in the rough because, or maybe a nail in the rough, depending on how you look at it, because to me, I see a high correlation between highly sensitive people and highly emotionally intelligent people. I think that in order to be highly sensitive, as defined in the book, it comes with a certain level of self-awareness, self-understanding, um, awareness of others and things happening around you, which are many of the traits or facets of emotional intelligence. So being able to be aware of and control of and expressing your own emotions and handling interpersonal relationships in a judicious way. That's the piece I think that might differ, is how you handle relationships with other people. And if you are highly sensitive but have a low ability to handle relationships with other people, I think that's where you get into some of the detrimental respects of a highly sensitive person. And I love what Tamiko and what I think it was Latoya who had just mentioned, using it as a strength or seeing the positive. And I think when you can understand the benefits of that and use it to your advantage when you're operating with other people, interacting with other people, that's where the gift comes in. But if you don't have that ability to kind of recognize and manage relationships with other people, I think that's where the threats of not just narcissists, but other, maybe even more well-intentioned people can really harm you. And so it's a scary position to be in, I think, to be both highly sensitive and lacking emotional intelligence. I think it makes you very vulnerable.
Thank you so much for that. All right. So you mentioned narcissism. That was a focal point of the book. So would you define narcissism for us? And also, if you would talk about whether or not there are degrees of it.
Yeah, for me, the simple definition of narcissism is a grandiose sense of self. So being overly self-absorbed. And are there degrees? I definitely think so. I think there's the diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder, which would require clinical intervention. That's on the more extreme side. But I do think there's a scale of narcissism where on the lower end, it can be just overly self-centered, overly focused in on the self, maybe not as detrimental to those around you, but then that spectrum goes all the way to people who can be highly detrimental to those around them in the way that they take advantage of them.
Thank you so much.
But I'd be curious again on this one to hear thoughts from the group on narcissism and if you want to share personal experiences with narcissists.
Well, I'll go first to give our audience time to think. There was a reason I read this book, and it wasn't because of the book club, you know. So I won't give too many details, but I was dealing with a toxic person. And this book really, highlighted some of the behaviors that this person has. And I say has because, like a bad horror movie, they're back. And so it's like, I'm still trying to figure out whether or not, as you mentioned, that spectrum, whether or not it's, you know, that malignant narcissist or that benign narcissist, right? Who doesn't really know that this is what they're doing. They don't really know that this is the impact they're having. However, when, speaking with that person and trying to get them to see their behavior, they're not changing the behavior, which leads me to believe they're on the more malignant side of the spectrum. So that's what I'll share.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing, LaTonya. And I'm sorry you have to go through that and continue to go through that, because it sounds like that narcissist is still in your life.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it is a work situation. So I don't have that, like the book mentioned, you have to find ways of dealing with it because you have no choice, right?
Wow. Oh, well, thank you for sharing, and sorry you're having to deal with that. Anyone else want to share their thoughts or experience with narcissistic people?
It most certainly puts you in a position where you're having to continue to sharpen your saw. I am a big Covey follower and practice. So, the sharpen the saw is the development aspect of the habits of highly effective people. So it takes me out of my comfort zone, and it takes you to a place that is just so overwhelming. So a lot of the tips and the tricks and the key things to pay attention to when you're dealing with someone that's like that, it it really does, kind of snap you back into position to get you to realize what's really going on and to be much more perceptive so you can control your response, because you have no control over the other person, and ultimately you always have control over how you're going to respond, but it's just how you do it in that moment. That's the key, because narcissistic folks, they know how to press buttons. I deal with it too, LaTonya, every single day. And recently it's gotten to a level where it's been the most heightened in my career here with the company. So this book was most certainly timely in the topic, and I'm looking forward to learning how others have gotten themselves through situations and things of that nature to come out on the other side of it. So I agree with you, LaTonya, as far as what you shared. It's a challenge. It really is. And from a work perspective, um, it puts you in a very precarious position with your leadership. So you want to express the right leadership response, given what your role is, but at the same time you don't want to dovetail your career, right, and being labeled as somebody who is difficult to work with because the person is so finessed at how to slip the
Manipulate.
situation. Yep, manipulate, that's the word, manipulate the situation and put the focal point back on you.
Exactly. I think those are excellent points. And when you're dealing with it in the workplace, that makes it ever the more challenging, to Tamika's points. And narcissists can be charismatic, and that's the difficulty. And highly sensitive people can have struggles in that area. And so when onlookers are observing a situation from a work perspective, not knowing the full details, you have the person who can manipulate the situation, who's charismatic, and the other person who's kind of more attuned to everything that's going on and feeling things a bit more deeply. And so the observer might say, okay, this person, this narcissistic person, is the one who has their act together, and this person is the one that's coming unraveled. And that creates a really difficult dynamic in the workplace. And I just wanted to walk through, when LaTonya, you were mentioning, the malignant versus benign and the toxicity of some narcissistic personalities. When you talk about those who are more toxic, there was an overview of the dangerous behaviors that were mentioned, and gaslighting being one of them, stonewalling and the silent treatment being another, blatant lack of empathy and penchant for exploitation, pathological lying, covert and overt put downs, controlling and isolating behavior, sabotaging, smear campaigns, the list goes on and on and on. But I mentioned those because in a work setting, and to the earlier point about observers who see or hear a pathological liar, who's smearing someone, who's sabotaging potentially that person's work and then isolating them in the process, that creates a very toxic environment and a very difficult workspace. And so my heart goes out to both of you or anyone else on the call who's in that boat and experiencing that in the workplace, and then certainly at home or in other settings as well, because that makes you feel like, you know, your reality, the gaslighting comes in, that makes you question what is real and what isn't, and really having that internal fortitude to recognize that it's not you, it's them. That's the problem. That's a hard thing to do.
Thank you, Chloe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in talking about this narcissist and talking about all those behaviors, so how do we ward off the attacks of a narcissist?
Yes, this one I'd love to hear from the group, to Tamiko's point earlier about, you know, wanting to hear some methods that people have deployed to overcome the throes of narcissists. Would love to hear from the group if anyone can share some of the ways that they've warded off these types of attacks.
This is DeWanda, and reading the book, I've been married for, I think, let's see, this is 22. So I've been married for 23 years. So going back maybe 19 years, I didn't realize what I was going through at the beginning of my marriage. But one day, it was New Year's Day, had just gotten home from church from candlelight service, and service started at 10. I came in at 6, 7 in the morning, but was at church the whole night. But we were sitting at the table, and my husband is asking my daughter, "So where were y'all at?" "We were at church." "The whole time?" "Yes." Now he's asking our 4-year-old daughter, "The whole time?" I'm like, and she says, "Yes." And well, who did your mom sit next to? And she was like, "Well, sister so and so was there. She sat next to so and so. Who else? Pastor so and so, Pastor so. Who else?" She said, "Jesus." And at that point, I laughed, but it was something is really wrong here. And later on, of course, we had the conversation, but in reading the book, I brought this back to his attention. Like, remember when this happened? Well, you were acting like a narcissist, like, and you were trying to control me, and this is what you were doing, gaslighting and stonewalling, and then you're questioning our child about my whereabouts. Like, that was wrong. And so, we just kind of talked about what happened from there to how we got to actually we're about to celebrate 23 years of marriage, but it took a lot of work and it took a lot of growing. And so I liked when you asked the question, how can you be highly sensitive yet not have the emotional intelligence? And I think it took a lot of growing on both of us because we both had to realize what was going on. He had to realize what he was doing, and I had to realize what was happening to me and not become a victim, basically.
Hey, DeWanda, I just want to pause and thank you for your vulnerability in sharing that story. I'm sure that's not easy to talk about and put yourself out there like that, but that's courage. Vulnerability is courage. And so thank you for sharing your story.
I'd like to share.
Please.
Sandra, I'm in transit, but I didn't help my dog. I find that dealing with narcissistic people, it's spiritual warfare, psychological warfare, and you have to take that power from them. Their power is what they try to exert over you to control you, to get you to react outside of character. I can think of two scenarios. One where a person who I brought into the company, certainly not AT&T, was a friend, and we competed for the same management role, and she was put over me even though I joined the company first. And her true personality came out. She was very abusive to everyone. but we had a history, and she had to understand, I know you too well. You cannot do that with me. But you have to take their power away and not be intimidated. Continue to conduct yourself the way you normally would. Handle your business effectively. Look them in the eye and do what you're supposed to do, and just show them that they have no power over you.
I love that, Sandra. So that's a way to ward off the attacks of narcissists, is not give them what they so crave, which is that control over you and your emotional state and your happiness, your joy. Don't let them steal your joy, basically.
I have a
Chloe,
follow-up question to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I
Sandra.
agree with that. I was going to say, to add on to what Sandra said, a lot of times you just have to have frank, open communication, and it's got to be fact-based, because these people will put you in a tailspin based on how they shrewdly turn situations around and those kinds of things. I too am dealing with one of those in a work situation, but literally, my normal style is, a very laissez-faire, fun type person. But when I'm dealing with this person, I can only speak, straight facts, because anything outside of that, the words get turned into something else. And that is the way I've learned to do what Sandra says, and taking the power back is, and you don't get to see who I am with everybody. I have a way that I deal with you that is just for you.
Yeah,
I
and
would like to
Mary,
ask
to
a
your
follow-up question.
point. Okay, sorry. Go ahead, Sandra.
And
My
then
follow-up
Latanya.
question is this. It was very difficult. It was hurting because this person was a friend, but I had to desensitize myself to show her you have no effect on me. But that hurt me by removing my sensitivity. So I would love to know how to fight the psychological warfare, but still maintain your sensitivity, because there are other people around you who are entitled to your sensitivity.
Chloe, you wanna?
Absolutely. And I can address that, and definitely, Latanya, want to hear what you have to say. And the way that I would think about that is on a individual case by case basis. And so what's healthier for you with that particular individual may be to just cut ties for the moment, at least not give of yourself to that person. But that doesn't mean that the sensitivity that you possess can't be applied to other people around you. It's just creating that boundary. And I know we'll get into talking about how to exercise boundaries, but that to me is hard. It's easier said than done to create that boundary, but that's on a case by case basis. If you know someone is detrimental to your own health and well-being, then by creating that boundary, you're preserving your sensitivity, that so you can have and use it on people who are more worthy.
Awesome. So 2 points. Yeah. So Mary mentioned dealing in facts. And I think that that's when it's important to make sure that that person has given you things in writing, because they have a tendency, like you mentioned, Chloe, to lie. And so you may have facts based on what they may have said, but if they dispute what they have said and you don't have the paper, quote unquote, to back it up, then, kind of what do you do? And Chloe, you had mentioned that, you can kind of control and I think also Sandra mentioned this, the control. You try to make sure that they don't get that control over you. But what the author had mentioned was, when that happens, that's when the sabotage can happen. That's when the slander can happen. When they can't control you, they try to control the narrative around you and the story about you. So, Chloe, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's a challenge with someone who is charismatic, who doesn't have to think about the sensitivity of things around them, isn't necessarily or likely emotionally intelligent, and has, you know, a platform to speak. That's where it's really challenging. And so when someone can't take your control or can't take control from you and then tries to exercise it on other people, you have to kind of be on the defense. And that's a difficult position to be in. I honestly don't have the answer to that. I don't know how to address a situation like that. And I'd be interested to hear from the group if anyone else has thoughts on how to combat that.
I kind of wanted to just share about the person that I was mentioning earlier. So just like Mary pointed out, it's all in how you choose to react. And I think sometimes you actually have to kind of almost step away from the situation, because just like the author mentioned in the book, it has to land somewhere, right? And so by stepping away, this particular person ended up lashing out at someone else. You know, her behavior is well known. So it's going to be harder for her to do the slander and all that good stuff because people have seen her for who she is. But again, if I had engaged her, if I didn't kind of control myself in the situation, it would have just looked like I was flying off the handle, or, you know, like you had mentioned earlier, Chloe, it's like you end up looking like the one who is the bad person, and she gets off kind of scot-free. So that was just kind of how I kind of dealt with it initially, was to just step aside and let people see her for who she was. And fortunately, in this particular case, they did.
Well, that is fortunate. And I'm glad that that came to light, who she is, because that can be difficult if it takes time. Because again, I keep emphasizing this point, a lot of narcissists are charismatic and they woo people, and they prey on people's pity, and they can change situations and alter realities and galvanize people. And so that's the challenging part. And so I'm glad in your situation that other people are able to see through that facade and see the actuality of who the person is. But if you don't have that, and if you are in a position where you don't let them get your control, and you protect and preserve yourself, but then they go and launch campaigns against you, that's a really tough position to be in, because how can you defend yourself against someone who has that kind of a platform?
Yeah.
And so
and
in
I
those,
guess,
oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
and I guess, you know, I think a lot of us, it just depends on your own personal beliefs. And I think a lot of us tend to think that there is that ultimate control, right? And I'll just kind of leave it at that.
That's a good point. Well said.
All right. So we talked about how to ward off the attacks of a narcissist. And so, you know, after all of that trauma and drama, how do we heal? You know, and also how do we exercise boundaries to help us do that?
Yeah. I will simply say, and I know this bleeds into the next point around self-care, but that preservation of self, that ability to protect who you are, your well-being in all of its facets, the, you know, emotional, mental, social, etc. That is, to me, the liquid gold. That's the magic. That's the secret sauce. But I'd be curious to hear from the group on ways that you've healed and ways that you've been able to exercise boundaries against toxic or narcissistic people.
Well, I'll share. Minerva hasn't shared anything. So
Please, Minerva.
I've learned the freeing word of no. It took me a long time to free myself and forgive myself for saying no, and be intentional about being selfish to love me in the situation. The end product of all this is self-preservation through it all. And I've got to be my best and authentic self. And if I can't say no, it's a yes and, which engages the other person and gives them accountability into the experience as well. So those are two things that I've learned to do. Wasn't very easy because I used to be the Statue of Liberty, I'll do it all. Yes, 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 come to me. And in my situation and working for a narcissist, there's the backdoor conversations of the person that I wasn't, but it was because I wasn't applauding them every time we got on a call. Like I didn't open up giving honor to this person in every conversation. Um, and I had to have that conversation aside to say what is lacking in us building a relationship that is beneficial to both. And we had a long pregnant pause before anybody said, I said, you know what, let's think about that and come back another day and have the dialogue without the emotion. And I had to take that, but the no and the yes and. Those are my tips to anyone. Feel free to use them.
Minerva, you were breaking up a little bit. Can you repeat what you shared about the lacking, the question that you asked, and the lacking in the relationship to build the relationship? I didn't hear that.
Oh, okay. What is it that is, my question was around what was the barriers that was causing us to have a challenge in this relationship that will be both beneficial to both you and I in making sure we're both successful and respectable and we have grace with each other. And it was a silence because it did a self-reflection of how am I behaving in this? Why is she perceiving? Why isn't she applauding me at this time? Why am I not saying you're the greatest thing since sliced bread? Because all I'm getting are the ends of the loaf. I'm not getting any of the good stuff,
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha. I like that. I like that. That's why I asked you to
so,
repeat it. Thank you. Thank you
yes,
so much.
you're so welcome. So say no to free yourself, and if you need to commit, say yes and.
Some of the,
Hey, Chloe.
oh, go ahead, Mary.
This is Deandra. I just wanted to comment on some things that I was able to do. I dated a narcissist, and then somehow it just seemed like it opened up the floodgates for narcissists in my life. My next boss was one. It just kept growing, and so I also had to just kind of look at myself. What about me? It felt like something about me was, drawing these people. And in a way, it kind of was. It was my people pleasing, my need to, put
Are you a
myself
highly
last and
sensitive
make
person?
everyone happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are
And
you a
so
highly sensitive person? Would you?
I am
Okay.
extremely, yeah. And so I just noticed people moods and, oh man, I can help. And I was not helping myself. So that was the work that I had to do. And when I started helping myself, then I was able to, create these boundaries and, just take a moment to not just, jump and say, here, I can help you, to actually stop before I utter those words. And that was huge for me. Like I'm always, jumping to help. So I had to do some work on myself to see what it was that was making me allow these people into my life.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Deandra, for sharing that. And um, yeah, that self-evaluation is a part of the process. And I was just going through some of the recommendations from the book, and I think you all have covered and touched on a lot of them. One is about documenting everything, sticking to the facts. So yes, keeping interactions as short as possible. You can be cordial, you can still be friendly, but don't engage. Switching the topic when discussions enter into that unsafe territory. So being highly sensitive and highly attuned and aware, you can know when it's starting to veer down that path and switch it up. Brainstorm ways to exit in the future. What's that exit strategy? If it's a code word, what is that? And then practicing
Let's take this
mindfulness.
offline.
Right, exactly, exactly. And practicing mindfulness and self-care, which I know we'll dive into for the remainder of our time, which is so incredibly important. So Minerva's learning how to say no, yes, and I like or no and, or what was the second part, Minerva? Yes,
What was
and
that? Yes, and.
yes, and
That's
okay.
giving
Wanted to make sure I got
accountability
that.
and engagement, that we're
Mm-hmm.
both in this together.
Yep. And then not letting them take your control and coming up with those exit strategies.
So we've been talking about self-care. So how
Yes.
important is that? How important is self-care?
Incredibly important. And I'll share an experience that happened with me in 2020. There was this little thing called a pandemic that happened and shook up the world. And so everybody was in very difficult situation. A lot of people had to deal with losses in their families, and just your life was disrupted in so many different ways. And so we talked about the divider at the outset of the call. For those who weren't on, I mentioned that was a shield for my kids. I got it at the start of the pandemic because the working from home with the kids being at home, and at the time I had a 1 and a 4-year-old, and one was still in diapers, and it was just exhausting me like nothing else that has ever exhausted me in my life. And I had no time. I had no self-care. All the boundaries blurred. I had all the guilt, the mommy guilt when I was working, the worker guilt when I was taking time during the workday to be with my kids. And so I was a hot mess with 2 T's. And so I really knew at that point I was nearing burnout, but I guess the highly sensitive nature knew at least enough to know that I needed to do something about it. So 2 things I started. One was seeing a therapist, which was life-changing and helped in so many ways. It exposed the lack of self-care. And the second thing was starting to build tactics to prioritize self-care. And I read another book, Atomic Habits by James Clear, which really helped me develop a plan on how to take small habits and build them into something bigger. And so I started with a goal. My therapist recommended 10 minutes a day to walk, just to go for a walk. I struggle with that. It took me 2 months to be able to do it like twice a week. And so trying to find 10 minutes in a day was really rough. But I was so glad that I started down that path, because 2021 took me for a whole nother loop. And had I not had that foundation of self-care, probably would have struggled even more, and don't know how I would have even made it through 2021. But I say all that to say, just to share a little bit of my personal experience, but to emphasize how incredibly important self-care is. And then I want to give a shout out to Michelle Thomas, who's on the call, who helped me find ways to practice self-care, because I was lost. I really didn't know. Therapist had told me 10 minutes to walk, and that's really the only thing I knew how to do. And Michelle was like, well, I got a list of things. Let me help you out. And she exposed me to some really wonderful programs that opened my eyes and that really helped solidify the incredible importance of self-care. It's not selfish, it's sacred, it's a service, not just to yourself, but to the people around you. So I'll stop droning on and on.
I would
Yeah.
love to see that list, Michelle. You have to share it with the group.
I know, it's like,
But of
Michelle,
course,
can
that
you put the
self-care is
list
going to
in
look
chat?
different. That self-care is going to look
very
different for everyone.
tailored and customizable to the individual. So knowing
There
Chloe
you go.
and her being a friend for a long time, knowing what works for her, and her pouring into me as well helps in that. Exercise is huge, and then just taking time for you, I think, is really important. And I just have to say to this group here, I have not chimed in. I am listening very keenly. I did not read the book. I just saw Chloe and Latanya and DeWanda, and I'm like, whatever they're talking about, I'm in. So I did not read the book. So I'm like, I cannot talk about, what is, highly sensitive and or narcissistic, because I'm like, I don't even know what, the technical term and definitions based on the book. But obviously I can relate to and appreciate hearing everyone's story and their perspectives. And sometimes it's not the clinical term, but just what you feel and what you experience, because what is a perception is reality, certainly to you. And I can say amen to all that I've heard. I've experienced this in different levels. But to where we are right now about self-care, when you know yourself, when you have confidence in yourself, you can really address anything that comes to you. You may not have a full handle on it. As Chloe said, she sought a therapist. She's a doctor of psychology. She's who I would go to. But when she goes to a professional to get the care that is needed, that's the sort of importance it takes for us as highly effective leaders in this business also to acknowledge that what's important is who we are and how we show up, and being the best version of that for ourselves. So I'm learning a lot from listening to you, and I've already downloaded the book on Audible and will be listening. I couldn't do the cliff notes while we were on the call, so I can, but I'll be doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle.
And Chloe, like yourself, I am talking to a therapist only to get to know Minerva better. And now that I work for you, let me go ahead and confess something. I do block off time on my calendar to hula hoop and that's what I do. And I listen to Helen Baylor and CeCe Winan. That is and I do that. So I will move them when we have mandatory meetings. But if you see it on my calendar, it's like she's the same time every day, blocked her calendar. That's what it's for.
That's sacred time, Minerva. That's sacred. I love it. I love it.
And Chloe,
It's so beautiful
Chloe, this is.
you mentioned.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say it's so beautiful how you mentioned blocking off that time because, like you, I discovered that self-care is really a wonderful thing. So I block off time to exercise, whether it's just going for a walk, doing a few crunches, what have you. Because what I've noticed, as was mentioned before, when you're highly sensitive, I think that goes hand in hand with the people pleasing. So you're constantly looking out at everyone else and where you can be of assistance with them, but you're not looking within as far as what you need. So it started off very simple for me, which was blocking off the time, doing the walk. And that turned into even at home with my kids and my husband, like, hey, I'm going on this walk. I'm taking me time. And even doing that little thing got me further to being okay with saying no to people for my mental health and sanity. No, I don't want to take that on. It's a no for me. And I've stopped feeling so bad about saying no to take care of myself and handle myself. And it was just that little increment, that little bitty thing that started it off and has me down this path where I feel myself getting stronger.
And Tamiko, I think you were about to say something as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick recommendation on the topic of self-care and something that I've come to practice more and more, and it helps me get through the day is that and recommend another book for reference. It's called The Morning Miracle. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It practices an acronym, SAVERS, and it stands the word SAVERS, SAVERS. S is silence, A is affirmations, V is visualization, E is exercise, R is reading, and S is scribing. So it's a practice to try and incorporate that into your daily routine throughout certain parts of the day. It really does have some key points in the book. So I just want to recommend that for the group for reference. And there are Cliff Notes versions of that out there for free online if anybody's looking for them.
I love that, Tamika. Thank you. And since we are in a book club and throwing out book recommendations, Minerva, when you mentioned finding Minerva through your therapist, you made me think of a wonderful book I recently listened to on Audible called Finding Me by Viola Davis. And if you haven't read that book, I would highly, highly, highly recommend it. And she narrates it on Audible, and you get to hear her story through her words, and it was life-changing for me.
And if you have Netflix, she also did an interview for
With
the book
Oprah.
with Oprah.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Yep.
was excellent. All right. Well, we just have 4 minutes left. I'm sure DeWanda wants to do some closing words. So, Chloe, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate you sharing with us today. And I will turn it back over to Dee.
Yes, thank you both. I really loved our live discussion. Miss Chloe, you brought it today. You got everyone engaged, and I know that they're going to listen to this recording time after time after time. And I think what I want to do, because we didn't get a chance, and I didn't want to disrupt us at all, But I want to set another call with us here just to come back and dive into some more discussions in our breakout rooms because we didn't get a chance to do that today. But I love the intimate conversations that we have when we're in our breakout rooms. So I will schedule that. Look for that. And guys, please come and let's dive more into the discussions. My takeaway today is self-care. Self-care is vital. And I believe as Miss Michelle said, our perception is reality, right? So if you feel like you are highly sensitive or you feel like someone is trying to be controlling or gaslight you, then that's what's happening. Take self-care, put up your boundaries, say no or yes and and all of these tools that were thrown out today, implement them in your life, put them up, take care of yourself. It is not selfish, it is service and
Sacred.
sacred. I love it. I
Thank you.
love it. So thank you guys so much. Look for the recording. Oh, and our next book, you want to start that now, is Bet on Yourself. Bet on Yourself. So we want to get that and let's start that. I will post in our team rooms just a schedule of the reading. We want to finish that by October so we can have our October live discussion. Again, thank you all so much. Thank you, Miss Chloe. Thank you, Miss Latanya. I appreciate you. Bye. Talk to y'all soon.
Hi.
Thank you
Thank
all
you.
so much.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.